Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. How is everyone doing this morning? Happy and blessed Wednesday, and welcome back to the Good Morning Asgard podcast for the summer of 2025. Today is episode 565 of the Welcome to Asgard podcast, where today we're going to talk a bit about James Gunn's Superman, how it's doing at the box office. Had a pretty good hold from Sunday to Monday. That's one of the first early indications of whether a film is going to have legs, at least when it comes to the domestic market, since international numbers are oftentimes reported much later, usually not until the following Sunday. And even then, sometimes we don't get the full country-by-country breakdown until maybe a week after that, depending on the site that one uses. So as of right now, even though the opening was rather underwhelming in comparison to other Superman movies, in comparison to much of Zack Snyder's DCEU, and the matters actually get worse thanks to reporting by Valiant Renegade. A shout out to Valiant Renegade, another great box office YouTuber, who pointed out that when you look at some of the analysis of the fact that the film sold around 7 million tickets or so, with an average ticket price of around $17, if memory serves me correctly, which means that this film sold that much less overall tickets, so much more so than Man of Steel and any of the other films that you want to put up in comparison up against it. Because it's one thing to adjust numbers for inflation, it's another to say, all right, well, let's see how many actual physical people are going to see these movies instead. And the fact that the average ticket price, meaning that most people going to see the film are going to the PLFs, or going to the IMAX screens, right, or going to those premium large format screens like Dolby as well, it tells us that the general audiences, people who are, used to going to the 2D regular everyday showings, really aren't showing up to a large degree for the film. Now, again, there's some good news, bad news here, because the bad news is that much less people, those many less people actually then went to go see Superman this past weekend, and also the drop-off being as good as it is between Sunday and Monday, of only about 60% or so. Again, we've seen MCU films and other big catastrophes drop in the 70s plus range around this time. It does seem to indicate that there might be some life in it. And really, we won't know, just like I said in the past box office breakdown on Sunday, we really won't know exactly how well or poorly this movie will do until we get those week 2 numbers. Once those second weekend drops come in, if this film is dropping in the 50s, it'll be in a good position. It'll be in a good place. If it drops in the 40s or less, then obviously at that point, oh boy, sky's the limit. Now, if it drops instead in the 60s plus, that's when we're going to see much more of an average, much more of a typical superhero type movie drop off in that second weekend. And if it gets to those levels, then yeah, that first weekend is going to be that much more important because it's all going to be stemming off of that one. So again, we won't know exactly what those numbers are. There's no early indications of what those numbers will be, at least at this point in time. But we'll go ahead and talk about that. And also some of the early tracking for Fantastic Four First Steps. We do have still early tracking on that. No official projections as of right now. Again, because that does not come out until next week, the end of next week. So that'll be interesting. That means also Superman has one weekend where it'll have full ownership of those PLFs. And since the average ticket price is as high as it is, it means that is actually going to be a good sign for them as far as the actual raw dollars are concerned. Now, again, as I mentioned before, the overall ticket sales are still pretty down. This is where I think people need to start to really focus, because even though on paper things seem to be really good for the box office right now, right? There seems to be some competition. You've got Jurassic World, just as for some reason, terrible movie, but people love watching CGI dinosaurs in a bad movie, I guess, especially in international audiences. But hey, domestic showing up for that film too. And so you have that movie going out right now, so that's bringing a lot of people to the theater. You now have Superman, which is also bringing some people to the theater as well. However, even though the money might make it sound like things are going pretty well, right? And that's why people like Tony at Deadline and others will run with let's not adjust the comparisons for inflation, right? They'll compare this to Man of Steel's opening or to the Batman's opening, but then they won't take into account the change in ticket price. They won't take into account things like that. And in many ways, that's very irresponsible, because what that means is that theater owners and others who are just taking the word of people like Tony at Deadline and other places are going to be hearing these numbers, seeing, oh man, this is really good for us. When in reality, they're probably also looking at the numbers and saying, yeah, there might be that number there, but since 90% or so of this money in the opening weekends, first 2 weeks typically, goes to the studios rather than to the theaters, down the line numbers are that much more important. And so if most people are going to see these films on those first or second weekends, okay, that's not that great for the theaters, especially since there's that many less physical people going. Because that also means there's that many less people going to buy popcorn and soft drinks, which is also why those prices continue to go up as well. So it's actually a much bigger problem than people even realize. There's a reason why, even in the midst of this summer where we're seeing increases in box office revenue, places like AMC and others are struggling. I mean, the stock price of AMC, let's just say, as a stockholder, right, I get updates every now and then. It's down to, I think, $3 a share. And even if you have a very basic understanding of stock market, you know, $3 a share is not much of anything. And this was never, at least since I've owned any stock in AMC, a lucrative brand by any means. I want to say I bought in when it was around maybe $9 or $10 a share or so to show my support, because I used to work for AMC, and overall I like AMC as a general company, as a general movie distributor. It's usually the places that I go are AMC theaters. But it is, I think, very important to speak things as they are, to speak truth. Right? To be honest about these things. That's why we, in typically this morning streams, do box office facts about what's actually going on, because people oftentimes are only getting part of the story. They're getting some narrative being pushed by mainstream media sources, which we always know tend to protect certain directors, certain studios, maybe even certain actors as well. And it's important, I think, to kind of get through and break through all of the noise. And that's what we do here on OMB Reviews. And so we'll go ahead and get started. And first, I do want to say thank you all for everyone who has been praying for me. For those that don't know, on last Friday, I pulled a muscle in my back, basically threw my back out, and it was over the dumbest thing. I was literally changing a trash bag in my house. And because of just that angle I must have been bending over at, I tweaked something in my back, almost fell to the ground. It's that level of pain and discomfort. And over the weekend, I tried, heating and icing and all those things, and none of it was really making it that much better. So finally got to go to urgent care, got some new muscle relaxers / steroid shot that's seemingly been helping a bit. So I was a little bit sore this morning, I think because I must have slept wrong, but overall feeling much better than I was just a few days ago. Obviously well enough now to be able to do a stream. I do have an ice pack on my back right now, so that is, I think, also helping with this. But anyway, let's jump ahead into the chat. Apologies that we had to cancel the Monday night stream, but I knew that y'all would understand. And again, thank y'all for those prayers. We got G-Monkey76, who was here at the very beginning saying, hi, everybody. What's going on, G-Monkey? Thanks for being here. We got Kincaid Rumschke hanging over on the Green Machine saying, I don't want to know what happened to your back. TMI. Well, I let you know anyway. Don't worry. It wasn't anything crazy. Caveat Ty says, hello to you. The Morak, what's going on? Says, good morning. Happy to hear your back is feeling well enough to do a show this morning. Hope you get back to 100% soon. I do as well. When it starts to impact my ability to pick up my kids, right, to be able to hold my almost 2-year-old, and having to be like, okay, you're crying for me to pick you up and hold you, and I really want to, but I also know that this could end up actually ending up really, really bad. It's a tough thing, right? So luckily, the last couple of days, I've been able to do that when she's needed me to. But yeah, of course, though, once I'm holding her or showing that I can hold her, my almost 5-year-old is also at that stage where it's like, oh, well, why can't you hold me when I need you? And it's like, you're twice her size, buddy. He's a tall boy. All right, Ambrose Chamberpot, what's going on? Good morning to you. Mama Dog saying, take a date to the movies, have snacks, $100. Basically. Yeah, it's kind of this almost like self-defeating. It's like the snake eating its own tail, right? They have to raise ticket prices because they're making less revenue. By doing so, less people are going to the movies, which means that less people are going to the actual physical theaters to buy tickets, which means less people are buying snacks and drinks, which means the theaters, in order to make the amount of money that they need to not only keep up their facilities, which are very expensive, especially in big cities. I mean, rent in those cities is insane. And also to be able to improve their sites, right? To be able to get seat upgrades if they haven't had a seat upgrade yet, right? Most of the theaters now try to offer you the lazy chair, right? The ability to kind of like lay back to kick up the automatic chairs, like when you push the little button. But a lot of theaters aren't able to get those because they just don't have enough traffic. They don't have enough people going to see it. But also that means that in order for them to make even just enough to sustain or make a little bit of profit, they have to raise their prices on their popcorn, their soft drinks, etc. So they very much go hand in glove, right? That's why it's that much more important for studios to really start to push forth movies that are going to bring people to the theater, right? It's one thing we're talking about films like Lilo and Stitch live action. Oh, it's $1 billion film this year. Okay, that's wonderful, right? Good for them. But if it means that they've made $1 billion with half the audience of what typically theaters are used to, or even just a quarter of the audience because of the ticket prices and everything like that, okay, that's still going to have a huge impact on that bottom line for the movie theaters. So it's one of those things, right? It's a double-edged sword. There's some really good things happening for theaters right now because people are at least going over the summer. My local theaters, you can usually tell how well their volume is based off of their opening. So when things were really bad, theaters near me wouldn't open until maybe 1 p.m., right? No matinee shows, right? Just a 1 p.m. is when they would start. Now I'm starting to see them because of Superman. I think also because of Jurassic World being at the same time. Now they're starting to open up closer to 11 a.m., right? And a couple of theaters actually are, almost closer to 10 a.m., which is very rare, right? It's only really summertime that ever happens in at least in the market that I live in. So that, again, speaks a lot to it. But again, when you are still having less people go to your theater, right, you might be making some extra money on your ticket, but remember, studios don't get 100% of the box office for one, but two, theaters get very little of the box office ticket sales in the first week or two of release. The way that it was described to me by my general manager when I used to work at AMC was for every $10, this is back when theater tickets were about $10, by the way, $10, every $10 that are spent opening weekend, first 2 weeks typically for most studios, the studio gets $9 and the theater gets $1. It's also why it costs so much, right? That's also why the snacks and the drinks cost as much as they do. All right, we got Forever Sci-Fi in the chat, who is a member, saying, I wanted to see the Superman from the animated series, but they made Batman instead. Just a stand-in for James Gunn. Why can't Warner Brothers just bring the Superman or Batman animated series to life? It's a great question, and this is something that I brought up in the review I did on the last stream that I was on, which was that I don't think that this movie really helps set the stage for, a lot of excitement in the future. I know that there are people out there, right? It's kind of the online conversation surrounding this movie is really fascinating because there is a contingent that we could call toxic, right? People throw that word around quite a bit. Now, it's interestingly, a lot of people in our community are even using that phrase when describing them. But there are some people that are almost militantly against this movie, right? Want this movie to fail. You could even argue hate this movie, right? And again, that exists for, I think, almost any movie, any large franchise especially. You're going to have people that are going to hate on it no matter what. The issue I have, though, are the people that are loving this movie are almost loving it in an unhealthy way. It's almost as if whenever they hear an alternate opinion about someone who did not like the movie, they immediately paint them as some of the worst people. They immediately put them into this contingent that they would call, quote, toxic or whatever it might be. And it's really difficult, right, to have those conversations when that is where your mindset's going to go. And in many ways, it's caused, I think, a lot of them to overdo it, to overindulge in their love of this movie to the point where many of them have just become plain simps. And I hate to use that word for them, but that's how it feels. It feels like the people that are coming out trying to defend this movie, it's like to the point where they're overlooking, they're glossing over the major flaws that exist within the storytelling, even just the most basic framework. Because even if you were just to look at this movie through an analytical lens, you'd have to be honest and say, yeah, it's a bit of a tonal mess. It doesn't know when it's being serious or when it's being comedic. It's just so haphazard in that there's never really a moment to breathe as far as whether it's drama or comedy or whether there's supposed to be a good mixture of them, because you're not really getting that good mixture. But if even just bringing that up, you're going to have people come out saying, how dare you? You just hate James Gunn. It's like, look, I'm not a fan of him, but if he makes a good movie, I will support it. I keep going back and saying, if it was all about James Gunn and his personality, I would not like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. I still think that's one of the best superhero movies that has yet to come out. I think it's the best movie that he ever did, right? From both writing and direction, like the whole combination of things. But I think Superman does have a lot of problems, And it really comes down to, again, you can enjoy the movie. I'm not trying to take away your joy from the film, but I also do want to have an honest discussion about the movie and the movie making process itself. And I just don't see how this specific film is going to be that launch pad to put forth all of the other characters and all of the other things from the DCU. I think that they honestly, James Gunn being the head of the DCU, right, being a head of this department, I think he should have known a little bit better to say, hey, you know what? I probably shouldn't be a part of this project. It's probably a little too personal. It's a little too close to home for me, right? Obviously, he added in a lot of himself. And it can't help but be distracting, right? For general audiences, yeah, they probably won't notice. They probably won't even recognize. They're like, wait, James Gunn likes dogs? Wait, James Gunn put the character of a dog from his life into the character of Crypto? Most of them aren't going to know that. But if you do know that, to say like, oh, you should just forget about that part, it's like, how can you? Because the movie is literally filled with self-referential things. You know, they can try to argue that, oh, the script was written outside of the whole cancellation thing, right? It wasn't really about that for James Gunn. It's like, well, I'm sorry, we know that James Gunn went through that. We know that when James Gunn put those really disgusting, quote, jokes out there was some backlash against that. And so when we see him portray people leaving comments and people criticizing him as being nothing but a bunch of brainless monkeys on a computer tied in, it's like, okay, guess what? We're going to take something from that. And it's not a good sign. But anyway, let us go back into the chat again. If you have a comment or question, just put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. @Odin lets me know that you're trying to get my attention. And we'll get started with going into some of the box office in just a second. Let's see, Caveat Ties again. Thank you for being here. Agent 57,000 DM. Welcome back to the chat. We got Kincaid and Rumsky saying, not buying your backstory. Well, it's the truth. Fear FEMA hanging out. What is going on there? Ghost of Freddie Mercury's immune system. Oh boy, welcome. Duncan Blackthorn, hail chat, and Odin. Hail to you. Thank you very much for being here. And we also have DeBeast808. What's going on, DeBeast808? Aloha and blessings, everyone. I really appreciate your take on soups during Salty Nerd. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Right? Because, you know, obviously going up against Brian, who is a mega fan of DC. I mean, this is a guy that has loved. He was a huge fan of the Snyderverse. He's a huge fan of this movie. And I do feel like there have been some comments made by others, right, him and others in that side of it, that have, I think, really just been off-putting, where it's like, look, you can like the movie, but this thing has flaws. That's why on the conversation side of it, I enjoyed our conversation. But I definitely think some comments have been made to say that anyone that's being critical of this movie is somehow grifting or somehow just trying to hate it for clicks. And it's like, well, no. Just like if you are expecting me to believe that your love for the film is authentic, you should also then give the same level of understanding and acceptance that my level of dislike for this movie is also authentic, or that the dislike that many other people have is authentic too, right? It has to, you know, the whole it goes both ways mentality. But I think the best way to talk about it is really just to break it down. I've always been this way, a subjective versus objective approach, right? Subjectively, you can enjoy any movie you want. There are terrible films that I have enjoyed quite a bit, that I've found a lot of entertainment value in. But if they're bad movies, I can still say, oh yeah, I won't go to bat for a movie that I am able to acknowledge as bad, right? I'm not going to say, oh, I enjoy this movie, and so therefore I'm just going to ignore any of the glaring flaws that might exist. I think the best example of this, at least in my life, is Thor Ragnarok. I had a lot of fun with that movie, but every criticism someone brought up, I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's a valid criticism. Completely. I like Iron Man 3. Most people don't. And guess what? My comic friends, when they were talking about why they hated the movie, I said, hey, it makes sense to me, man. Right on you. So you won't hear me defend the objective flaws in those movies, just like I will not gloss over the objective flaws in this movie. Anyway, Kincaid and Rumsky tagged to say, what price for a ticket for Superman would you find acceptable based on the quality of it? If this was back in the good old days, I would say it would maybe be worth the matinee price, which back when I was younger was $5. I don't think matinee pricing is that low anymore. I think now it's like $10. Matinee pricing, I think, would be worth it. But honestly, I don't think it's the kind of movie you'd need to go out to the theater to go see. I don't think it's worth it. I think that if you're going to watch it, or if you want to watch it, it's going to be better in a theater with a crowd. So I would actually say, yeah, if you want to have the experience with the crowd and you are wanting to see this movie, then go see it with a crowd. If you are very ambivalent, don't care which way or one way or the other, then hey, I would say hold off on it. You can watch it when it comes out on you can watch it when it comes out on streaming, or wait for it to, sail at high sea, whatever it is. But I don't think it's really worth it. I don't think it really is worth it. The Discerning Critic, didn't see a tag here, but I was kind of reading your comment. It says here, I think the issue is some people need to understand that many people don't want to overanalyze film. They just want to have a good time. But it's not about overanalyzing, Discerning Critic. That's the issue. These are glaring flaws that are in the movie. These are glaring issues. So it's one thing to enjoy the film, but if you're going to be blind to those issues, that's where I have the problem. If you're not willing to admit the flaws that are objectively there, that's when I come in and say, okay, I'm going to have issues with your opinion now, right? If you have an opinion on a movie, again, I will respect that opinion as long as it's coming from the position of, okay, yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of that movie, but can recognize the problems and the flaws that exist. Jay Price, what is going on? Welcome back. Let's see. Amber Shamerpot saying, one thing is for certain, not paying $80 for a Galactus popcorn bucket. Oh, yeah. Good grief, man. Good grief. Marby Dog says that the matinee pricing for them is $12. Is that what I'm assuming that is saying? Forever Sci-Fi, doing 60-second planks daily can strengthen your back muscles to help prevent those injuries and doesn't take a lot of time, which is good when you've got kids. Glad you're feeling better. Well, thank you very much. See, planks, I understand. A couple people have sent me some videos trying to explain things. And again, if you have a comment or question, please put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. It really does help out a lot for me. I don't ask people or force people to super chat to get comments read. All that I ask, very simple request, is that you put @Odin at the very beginning of your comment. That's all. That's all. Very rarely do I make exceptions. But anyway, Forever Sci-Fi, thank you very much for that. Yeah, so a lot of people have been giving some recommendations on like certain stretches. And I know that I think it was Andy Masterson. Shout out to you, man. He's the one that made the little Odin figurine that's on the shelf behind me. There he is, sitting right there next to the picture of the Charmander. And unfortunately, it's like, as I was listening to the instructions, I'm like, I'm already lost, because it's like you're having to do so many different things that I just don't know how to do, right? Because I'm just, I'm not the pinnacle or the peak of fitness, as it were. But planks, I get planks. So as soon as my back starts feeling a little better, I could definitely try to add that in, because I know it also helps with core strength. So it's $6 where I'm at, says Luke M. Nice. DeBeast808 saying here, that's a fair take. I'm waiting for... Dude, you just put the @ ODIN. @ ODIN. Just tag @Odin. @ ODIN. All right, DeBeast808. That's a fair take. I'm waiting for streaming. Besides, my kids wanted to watch dinosaurs despite having Jurassic Park at home. They filmed it here. No! Oh, Jurassic Park. Oh, man. Jurassic Park is so much better than Jurassic World. The Jurassic World movies, just all of them. Even the first one with Chris Pratt, I was never a fan of that one either. It was a mid-movie at best. And then everything since then has just been garbage. It's been awful. It's been so bad. Oh, man. But hey, kids will enjoy big dinosaurs. That's just how it'll go sometimes. All right, well, we need to talk about some box office numbers here, because again, we break down the numbers here. We're always honest. We're always straightforward. We take the numbers as they are, not as we would like them to be. And so we will go ahead and get started with that. And because of the fact that we're talking about numbers here, you know what that means. You know what time it is.
Time to see a real mathematician at work.
That's right, everybody. It's time for the math. It's time to see a real math magician at work here. And as you can see, we got good old Nance over on Deadline. Nance and Tony, our dynamic duo of box office coverage. Nance takes the international, Tony takes the domestic. And this headline says it all to me as far as the narrative that they're trying to paint. Superman powers to 220 million global opening. What they very conveniently leave out is that means it's $80+ million behind where the Minecraft movie was. $80 plus million behind where Lilo and Stitch live action was as well. And that this is nowhere near the openings, even globally speaking, of previous Superman DC properties. The only one in my comparison charts that this was able to beat, at least domestically, was the Joss Whedon Justice League movie. And that, I think, says quite a bit, because whether you're taking it out of inflation or whether you're looking at ticket prices and looking at ticket sales, this movie is not bringing as many people out as those did. And again, you could argue, well, that was back at the heyday of the superhero movie, and so now the superhero movies come off. It's like, okay, you can say that. Doesn't change the fact that less people physically are going to see these movies. And when you have a film that's meant to be the biggest film of the year, right? When you're putting your film out in July, when you're putting your film out in the summer, and it's a movie like this, and you're promoting it the way that you are, and you've brought on James Gunn, and you've brought him on to restart an entire universe, this should be huge. And yet what we're seeing is a middling domestic opening, right? It's fine. And we're seeing a really bad international showing. So we'll have to wait for the end of this weekend to know for sure where those internationals are going to line up. But as of right now, the movie opened to underneath $100 million internationally. That's a really bad start for a movie like this. A movie like this should be doing much better. And again, you could argue, oh, well, Superman's much more of an American property. Maybe. But why is it that Man of Steel was able to maybe do a little bit better? Why was it that other iterations of these characters that are more maybe American-centric were also able to reach out a little bit better overseas too? I think that it says a little bit about what's going on with this movie. I think there's a lot of factors at play here, right? It could be some of the controversy surrounding James Gunn. I think that's a bigger portion than people may realize. It could also be that the trailers haven't been all that great either. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of the trailers that have been released. I think that the criticisms there were very much warranted. You do have, I think, a very talented cast, but a relatively unknown cast as well, right? Most people are like, who in the world is David Cornsweet? What is a Cornsweet? What does that even mean? Or they'll look at some of the other actors and say, I don't know. They'll be like, oh, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. I know Nicholas Hoult. He looks familiar. But who knows? Hard to say. Hard to say what the motivations there might be. But there's multiple reasons. I think there's multiple factors at play as far as why this film's numbers did not come as strong as they did. But even with this being said, right, this was with the Monday update here, saying it flew a little bit higher than the Sunday actuals, reaching 220. It's because the original reporting was around $122 million domestic. It was able to get up to $125 million domestic, so it did better. So that's a good thing, right? It means that the tracking is a little bit better. But the internationals did not move a bit at $95 million. Here's the good news, okay? So we have the Monday numbers. We do not yet have the Tuesday numbers. Those should be coming out in the next hour or two. But as you can see, the film only dropped 59% on its first Monday. That is a very good percentage. That is a very good percentage. I was just double checking to make sure the Tuesday numbers aren't being reported yet. So a 59% hold from Sunday to Monday in your first week is a very good number there. Of course, the issue is that it's still dropping from a lower number than the previous films from 2025 and from the other films that this movie is being compared with. So it's a good start, but it needs to keep doing this, right? It needs to keep going forward. Now, if we see a very small drop from Monday to Tuesday, Tuesdays are discount Tuesdays, so a lot of people go to the theater. But again, that's still a discounted ticket, does not necessarily mean a lot more people are going out. We should expect to see between Monday and Tuesday either an increase or a very, very small decrease. But hey, starting off 59% is actually not that bad. As I said, when it comes to a lot of MCU movies, when it comes to a lot of superhero movies in general, we usually, just big budget films, we tend to see much bigger drop-offs. So let's go to Jurassic World Rebirth. Now, this is going to be a little bit, I think this was the film that came out over a holiday frame, over a holiday weekend, so this might be a little bit different. Yeah. So as you can see, it had that early release on that Wednesday, Thursday, and then it had Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So even that movie, right, on July 7th, so that was still in the midst of a holiday frame, dropped 60%. But then notice that for its next Friday, dropped 56%, 56, 57. Again, so not a terrible hold. This movie is actually holding much better than what anyone could have anticipated. Again, I think the movie is complete trash. But the box office, again, this trend line shows you quite a bit, right? It says, okay, here's where it started. And it then went into that average line. And now it's doing above average. right? So this compares it over the last like 5 years. That's usually how this chart works here. So, what do most movies, if their opening weekend is X, what do they typically do down the line, right? And so usually most films end in this shaded area here. The fact that the line's above that shaded area means this movie's doing better than your average. So we don't have enough information yet on this movie, right? So this is actually towards the bottom of the average. So it's still not performing above average, but it's still at least in that range. So that's why overall it's a good drop, right? At 59%. So this is after an opening premiere of 22.5 million. This, of course, is including some of the early Amazon showings on that Wednesday. Also, the Thursday showings, which had early showings as I think as early as 2 or 3 p.m. Remember for Man of Steel, that was back in the day when you had maybe 10 p.m. showings on that Thursday. So a lot less time, but actually more people, because people used to be used to doing that. They used to be used to go to seeing a film at 10 p.m. at night, or the midnight showings, right? Even back in 2013, that was still a thing. Kind of, COVID definitely destroyed that to much degrees, but hey, the studios and the theaters also made a lot of bad decisions there as well. So therefore, as of right now, it's got a domestic of $137 million, but that international is not going to move until next weekend when those numbers start coming in, of only $95 million. So typically in a big film like this, you want to have, if you want to be a big success, right, a huge box office worldwide, you want to have your international at a higher level. Now, again, financially, it's better for them to have more money domestically because you get much more return on investment. Remember, studios get about 55% of the entire box office for the domestic market, and then only about 40% for the internationals, with China being the country where they only get about 25% return on. So it's actually better financially if they have that higher domestic. But this does cut into what your total box office is going to look like. So that is why there is there's some issues going on. Now, we'll do this live because, again, it helps keep me honest. They are still reporting that $225 million production budget. That's without marketing costs. I really don't believe that. I really just don't buy into that. And a big part of that is because I know how much these movies tend to cost. And you could argue, well, the people running Warner Brothers are trying to keep budgets tight. You can say that all you want. But it's also true that on a tax form, and you could argue, they were trying to get the most tax money they want out of it. So what you would then be saying is, so they lied about their budget to get the most money? Because that's tax fraud, if that's the case. And I highly doubt that on a public document that this studio would be committing tax fraud. Again, maybe that's a little bit too much faith in the system, but I just highly doubt that. But on that tax document, they said the budget was around $360 million. Now, I'm not an expert in tax law. I'm not an expert in tax forms. So maybe you're allowed to overestimate. And then whatever your actual spend ends up being, that is going to reflect your tax credits. But based on what we have in front of us, it would seem, if your form says X, then you will receive Y because you've told us this is the amount of money spent, and therefore this is how we can then calculate what tax credits you're going to get from us. This was in Ohio, I believe. So when they say $225 million, it's like, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. Because either one, you're getting over $100 million worth of tax credits. I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. That didn't happen here. Because tax credits are never that high on that kind of a budget even. Or they're lowballing it. And this is what studios do. They put fake numbers out for the trades to pick up. And this trades just run with them as if they are gospel. And we're just kind of left behind saying, wait a minute, this is one of those rare occasions that we actually have a tax form to go off of here. And it is nowhere near $225 million. So again, that's a digression, but still a fair point, and I still think a valuable one to boot because, hey, guess what? 225 versus, and again, they did have tax credits, so maybe closer to $300 million worth of a budget. Okay, that's the difference between a break-even point of in the 600 range to a break-even point in the $900 million range. That's what we got to work with here. But getting into the comparisons, right? So let's go ahead and put this up against Man of Steel. That's going to be the big film that a lot of people are typically going to bring up because that was the kickoff of the DCEU under Zack Snyder. Not a fan of that movie either, by the way. I'm not a fan of either of these films. If I had to watch one again, if I was forced to, I'd probably watch the 2025 Superman again because at least it had some entertainment value that the Man of Steel film did not actually have. But doesn't necessarily mean that it is a better made movie or anything to that degree. All right. Of course, the numbers.com is going to be acting up, taking forever to load. It's one of the big issues I've had with this site recently, because I don't know if their traffic is up or if they have just switched services and providers. It just gets annoying after a time. Okay, looks like that might have done it. Let me just throw the Batman into the mix while it is still loading, because, hey, why not? Maybe it'll still end up working nonetheless. So as that is loading up, going over to Box Office Theory, right? Remember that they had the early projections of Superman getting upwards of $170 million or more in its domestic debut. That was obviously the high end of their estimates. The film came in well beneath them. Now, they eventually adjusted that down, and officially Sean Robbins had the tracking for the movie of opening in the $130+ million range. That didn't happen either. So even though the film did better than the estimates from the trade publications, because they had this film at $100 million plus opening, even they, when they saw those early reviews and those early numbers, even Tony at Deadline was saying, oh, it could be upwards of $150 million, and that didn't come to fruition. So again, it's that good news, bad news. Good Monday hold, right? Good Sunday to Monday hold, but that was after a weekend that was actually disappointing. All right, I think this is up now. So let's go ahead and adjust for inflation, because that's the only way to really have a fair comparison here, okay? So remember also this fact, right? Superman did have an early release on Wednesday. Man of Steel would have opened on that Thursday. So it goes on from here to say that the opening weekend for Superman is around $137 million. Sorry, is $125 million was what the numbers came into, right? So look at the comparison here between Man of Steel, $179 million. That is a massive difference between those two movies. And if inflation drives you nuts, guess what? $17 your average ticket sale for that movie versus 2013, which may have been what, $10 to $11 per ticket back at that time, maybe even less. Let's see if we can get that up. Let's see, average movie ticket price 2013. Let's just try to keep things honest here. Let's see. From Variety, movie ticket price average $8.38. Wow. $8.38 is your average ticket price. And that was the highest. So movie tickets in the second quarter of 2013 hit the highest price ever at $8.38. So even if let's take inflation out of the equation then, okay? Let's put the actuals up on the screen, because this is one way that you can also make the comparison. So that's $125 million, but $17 per ticket, whereas Man of Steel made $128 million in its opening weekend for only $8 a ticket. So you had almost the same exact box office as far as raw numbers are concerned, and yet it was twice as expensive to go see Superman. Guess what? You know what that means? That means your audience is that much smaller for Superman than it was for Man of Steel. You're having to cut quite a bit of people out. So that's why I was trying to always point this out. Inflation is not the only way to look at things, but it's usually a pretty good indicator of where you are. Because even if you were to take the ticket prices, it tells the same exact story, which is, guess what? Man of Steel had a much bigger opening. A lot more people want to go see Man of Steel, right? The raw numbers may not say that. That's why Tony at Deadline is very disingenuous whenever he tries to put these comparisons out there without bringing up ticket price, without bringing up inflation, because it paints the wrong picture. If you were just to put these things on paper, you'd say, oh, look at that. Superman almost beat Man of Steel. But it actually wasn't, right? In today's dollars, that's $180 million for Man of Steel. In the average ticket price, guess what? That's a lot less people going to see Superman than Man of Steel. The Batman as well, unadjusted for inflation, $134 million. It's a lot more than that. Now, Batman came out in 2022. I happen to know that one was definitely closer to around $11 or $12 a ticket. So still, it's $12 a ticket going into $134 versus $17 a ticket going in. Guess what? That's still a lot more people going to see the Batman in its opening weekend. So these are just the box office facts. I'm not trying to, spin a narrative here. I'm just trying to be honest. And some would say, okay, well, let's go ahead and say, but yeah, you have those numbers, but the budgets, right? If you adjust the number of the budget for Man of Steel, the Man of Steel film costed so much more than Superman by comparison. Well, let's actually look into that. So again, I think the budget for the movie was actually closer to $300 million. Again, you're not getting over $100 million worth of tax credits. And I'm sorry, unless you're going to claim that they lied on a tax form that is publicly available, I don't see how you could argue, well, yeah, that they got the tax credit and that was just a number they were throwing out there. Oh, yeah, because we just throw numbers out there on our tax forms, right? You can make estimates, sure. But you're telling me that $365 million is what you said you spent, and then you actually only spent $225 million? Now, again, that's obviously would be including any tax credits, so they would probably have said instead, oh, yeah, it cost $255 million, making $30 million. And it's like, I'm sorry, but that's $100 million that you're off by in your estimated budget. I'm sorry. I don't buy that. Logic just tells me that is just not an acceptable number there. But again, when you adjust the numbers for inflation, guess what? If your budget's actually closer to $300 million, and that's with tax credits included, oh boy. Actually, it's not that much of a difference between these two when you look at the actual raw data, right? The Batman would have actually been the cheapest by quite a bit, according to the numbers as they have been reported. Now, also, when you adjust for inflation, Man of Steel made over $900 million. The Batman over $829 million. And so the question then is, where does Superman end up? I think from the beginning I said I would not be surprised to see it in that $600 to $700 million range. I think that's where we're probably still looking for this movie to be. I think that's most likely going to be the scenario that we have in front of us. But anyway, what say you guys? So good news, bad news right now for Man of Steel. Man of Steel is not Man of Steel. Superman 2025. James Gunn's Superman, I should say, to be the most accurate. Has had a very good Sunday to Monday hold. Seems to be indicating that it might actually have domestic legs. It's not doing much of anything internationally. If that continues to hold forward, that's going to limit how much money it can make. It's going to be better for its bottom line if it's making more money domestically, but if it's not getting that international push, that means its final end run can only be so high. So 600 to 700 million sounds about right to me as of this moment. Let's see. This is Discerment Critic. Thanks for tagging, saying, I mean, it's not listed anywhere when it comes into the idea of the chat, so I had no idea. Yeah. Even if you just put my name at the very beginning of Odin, then I know you're trying to get my attention. Kicking Remsky. That's the stuff. He loves the box office. He loves the math video, as always. Jay Price hanging out. What's going on? Tagging to say, what do you expect the drop-off to be Superman this coming weekend? Well, based off of that Monday, all right, the Monday drop-off that we've just seen, we'll wait for the Tuesday numbers to come out there. I do suspect that we'll see an increase because of the Discount Tuesdays. We'll have to wait and see. I do think that what you will likely see is a drop of about that amount. I would not be surprised to see it drop in the 50 to 60% range. And if it does that, then it's in a decent position. If the internationals don't show up for it, that could very much be a huge problem. Like the huge Achilles heel for this movie could end up being those international audiences. But domestically, it's going to be in a decent position if it holds that well. And with only a film like Eddington coming out, with Superman not losing any of the premium format screens, the word of mouth, again, based on all reporting, right? The post-track, ComScore, tracking, saying that, kids under 12 are giving this like a 5 out of 5, giving it an automatic recommend. Like this film is seeing these kinds of numbers where, like, I'm sorry, the opening weekend just didn't really show that sentiment. But if those do turn out to be true, the second weekend numbers should be really good. That's where we'll actually get to see, okay, is that, quote, A- cinema score accurate? Is that much more reliable, in my opinion? Post-track numbers, are those accurate? We'll find out. Alex McCarthy, thank you very much for being a member here on the channel at the Citizen of Asgard level for 65 months in a row. 65 months as a member, dude. Wow. Berg Flicka 1026 saying, there are schlocky movies, guilty pleasure films, or date/chick flicks. But a bad movie is a bad movie. James Gunn's James Gunn is the latter. Is objectively a bad piece of storytelling. Yes. And again, you can enjoy bad storytelling if that's what you want to do. And again, it doesn't come down to you're not like, I love how bad the story is. No, obviously that's not the case. But you can enjoy a movie because it's got explosions and it's got CGI elements and it's got things that you like. You can like that. I'm not trying to take that away from you. But what you can't do is you can't turn an objectively flawed movie into an objectively good movie. That's not how it works. Rogue Attraction, welcome back. We got the Morak tag to say, I lost interest because of the marketing. Maybe I'll catch it on HBO, but right now I don't care if I see it or not. I think the marketing, I think, hurt the film. And I think for people that are kind of in the know, follow this stuff, especially if you know about the things that are being said by directors and actors on a daily basis. Yeah, I think that James Gunn stuff hurt it quite a bit because we don't call it James Gunn Superman for no reason. There's a very good reason. It's because in all of the marketing materials, this is as much of a James Gunn story and movie than it is anything else. The fact that in like the cover story for one of these magazines, you have the two lead stars, Superman and Lois, but then you also have tied right next to them James Gunn. It's like, okay, guess what? You've just now, in your marketing for this movie, made this a James Gunn story, made this a James Gunn focus. And whether you like James Gunn or not, that's going to be polarizing. He's a very polarizing guy. A lot more people know about the James Gunn stuff than a lot of other actors or directors. Forever Sci-Fi, corn sweat sounds like something that Midwesterners suffer from. It does. J. Alex McCarthy Jr., what's going on? Alex McCarthy saying, howdy, Odin, how's it going? Superman's James Gunn is probably a movie I won't like. See, then no, I would actually argue against Alex McCarthy. I think this would be a movie that you would love because you love bad movies. Rogue Attraction, welcome. Just hit streaming. Yeah, I mean, that's why I mentioned before when How to Train Your Dragon first came out, it was doing well. It was never going to hit $1 billion or do anything like that. Gandalf the Fat, welcome. Again, just put at Odin at the very beginning of your comment, just like Grabthar's Hammer did here. Helps me know you're trying to get my attention because y'all talk to each other. But if you're talking to me, I just like to know that you're actually talking to me. Grabthar's Hammer says, how dare you not be an expert in tax law? I know. How dare I? How dare I? KN Kareen, what is going on? Sahil99, what's going on, brother? Tag to say, I hope you and your dogs are feeling better. Do you see a movie's budget going down anytime soon? Since they can't seem to make nearly as much as they used to, wouldn't it make sense to lower budgets? Yes, it would. When it comes to Disney, no, Sahil. I don't think that they're going to lower their budgets. I think Disney is caught in this machine. And the fact that they have a studio that they built over in the UK, like they've done a lot of investments within the UK itself. So because they want those tax credits. But because of those tax credits, it means that they are going to be that much more likely to be either wanting to or being okay with overspending on their budgets. Because like, oh yeah, we'll just get some of that back. It's okay. But no, I unfortunately don't think they should. They really do need to, Sahil, because the only way that these movies can be successful going forward is for them to make some changes. And we're not seeing much change happen at the theaters, so there's not much that they can do there. The only thing that they can do as far as their own bottom lines are concerned is by spending less, being smarter with their money. But this has been brought up in FNT, it's been brought up in many other places. The primary issue a lot of these studios have, they're American. And they have to deal, therefore, with unions. And the union cost is the big problem. The union cost. That's what's ballooning a lot of these budgets. Because how is it that someone in Japan can make Godzilla Minus One for about $15 or $20 million? And yet, if we were to do the same thing here, Monsterverse, guess what? It's going to cost at least $150+ million. A lot of that's because of unions. Unfortunately. Alice McCarthy saying here, Odin, I'm definitely a fan of the Snyderverse, though I'm not a Snyder bro or whatever they are called. If you are a fan of the Snyderverse, if that's what you're going to say you're a fan of, you're a Snyder bro. You're not a Snyder bot, but you're a Snyder bro. Caveat ties, thank you for tagging, saying here, let's see if this movie ZZ tops the box office. Yeah. Brandon Dudd tagged to say, will it make more than Ant-Man 3? I do think it'll make more than Ant-Man 3, yes. It is being much better received than Ant-Man 3 ever was. Even though Ant-Man 3 did have a bigger opening. That's also kind of crazy to think about. Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is a catastrophe, still did better in its opening weekend. Now, again, a lot of that's because the MCU is always very much front-loaded. People who want to go see it right away are going to go see it right away. Let me go ahead and pull that up on the board here too. So that way we can get a comparison. Let's go ahead and transition that over. There we go. We wait for this to load up because it's taking forever. As we're waiting for it to load up, oh, wait, never mind. We got it. We got it, dude. Yeah, so adjusted for inflation, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania made around $492 million. Yeah, I think Superman's going to make a lot more than that. I think it's going to do a lot better than that one did. But opening weekend, look at where Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania ended up. Actually, no. Is this adjusted for inflation? It's the global number. That's right. So Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania did better globally than this one did. Yeah, so $109 million is where Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania ended up at its opening weekend with $125 million. So that was actually low for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It was internationally where Ant-Man did better. So its global opening was higher because of that. Again, that's where the internationals really come into to play. It's where the internationals come in very importantly, right? So Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania made $270 million total internationally. Superman so far after one weekend's made $95 million. This is again in all markets. It had a wide release in all of its markets. So unless it's able to really pick up some speed and have some really good holds, it may not even get to this amount. It may not even get to this number. It's going to easily pass this number domestically, but again, internationally, not so much. I do think that the split we're seeing domestic international is probably going to stay, with the domestic being a higher number. And again, that's good for your bottom line. But you still gotta, there's still that perception. It's like, okay, but how much money is it gonna make? Bookstore Thor, thanks for tagging, saying, is adjusting for inflation an accurate analog for assuming tickets sold? It usually goes together. So usually if your number is adjusted for inflation higher, right? So if you're comparing two movies and one film's adjusted number is higher than another film from this year, normally your ticket prices are going to have a very similar thing. Now, again, it could be different, right? The difference could actually be more staggering. Usually it's more towards the negative. So if you do a ticket sale comparison, usually it's that much more staggering of a difference. But very rarely, if ever, have I seen a number that's higher in inflation have somehow less tickets. It's happened maybe once or twice that I've been looking at it. See, King and Rumsky tagging to say, did you collect any comics when you were a kid? I was never a comics person. No, never really got into the comics game. Just was never my thing. Loved going to the movies since I was very little. That's kind of where most of my focal point went in. Let's see. Fun with collecting. Thanks for becoming a member at the Citizen of Asgard level. Appreciate you. So I'll retroactively go back to read your comments. He says, I concur, sir. And then says, James Gunn, I feel, ruined the excitement for this movie with too much PR of James Gunn. Completely agreed. Less is more. Absolutely. Absolutely. Gandalf the Fat, great name still. What does the theatrical engagements mean exactly on the numbers site? It means the number of theaters. So when it says, so basically what this would mean is opening weekend, here's the number of screens it was in. Here is the number of total engagements, meaning total theaters that it was shown at. Almost like total showing. So basically means over the course of its run, Man of Steel was seen at around 21,000 screens. The Batman at 30,000 screens. Quantumania around 22,000 screens. To my knowledge, right? Because again, this is just talking about by the end of the run. That's why in total this number is the same right now, right? So the maximum number of theaters this movie was ever at was, for instance, for Man of Steel, the maximum number of theaters was 4,200, 4,400. Etc. So that's what that number would be telling me. Which is kind of crazy to think about because it's like, wait a minute. Why don't they just open at that amount of theaters? Again, there could be a multitude of reasons as to why. This could be including some of your like discount theaters that don't get the movie until after it's been out for a couple weeks would be my best guess. But in general, that's what I believe that is referring to. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the last thing I did want to talk about. Obviously, keep the conversation going in the chat, and I'll pull up those questions. But since it was in the title and we only have a few minutes left, I did want to bring up Fantastic Four, the first step. So still don't have the official, box office projections yet for this movie. But this is a film where this movie is a lot less hype. Superman, I would argue, had a lot more hype going into it because you had a huge fan base that showed up. The reason why it did as well domestically, I think, is because you did have a lot of passionate DC fans, James Gunn fans, and your throw and mix of normies in there too. And they clearly, at least as far as the reporting, have enjoyed the film quite a bit. I think Critic List is still the best place for us to get the best understanding. Maybe we'll bring that up in a little bit. But in general, I would argue, even if I didn't like the movie, yeah, it's definitely got some supporters for sure. That's why it wouldn't surprise me if James Gunn's Superman held well in its second weekend, domestically at least. But right now, the projections for Fantastic Four, this was updated, I believe, on the 10th. So this is still about 6 days old. So we'll get an updated 7-day or 5-week forecast coming from Box Office Theory sometime today or tomorrow. And we'll get the official box office projections sometime today or tomorrow for Box Office Theory. And so $125 million is what the low end range for the film is, and 155 is the high end. So that means that right now, he is projecting, Box Office Theory, Sean Robbins is projecting Fantastic Four will have a higher opening domestic than Superman did. I would question that. So just like he overprojected for Superman, I think he's overprojecting for Marvel here. Because yes, MCU films almost always universally have that stronger opening weekend. So that's why maybe you see it. Maybe you do see Fantastic Four. But the difference is going to be, I think Superman's going to hold much better in its second weekend, and I think Fantastic Four is going to fall off a cliff in its second weekend, based on the early indications of what the story is, of where it's likely going as far as the direction is concerned. We'll have to wait and see exactly what the general sentiment is and how people think of the movie. But if it plays out the way the marketing and the way that the rumors and some of the leaks have been about the movie, it would not surprise me to see this film have a very similar run to other recent MCU movies, which is, hey, you have a decent opening weekend and then you fall off a cliff and you don't even make it to $500 million, if even that. And since these movies always cost at least $200 million to make, this movie is going to have to make a lot of money to break even. They've been putting a lot of marketing into this, so don't be surprised if your total cost of that movie is well over $300 million. I think it's like $200 million worth of budget. Let's see if we have that information. We'll try and look that up real quick. Try and keep me honest. So no reported budget as of yet, but we can assume it's Marvel, it's MCU, it's a big film for them too, a lot of actors in it. It's going to be at least $200 million worth of a budget. Marketing for a movie like that tends to be $100 million, tends to be 0.5, right? So you take your budget, multiply it by 1.5, that gets your total cost. So yeah, we're talking about a total cost of probably closer to $304 million, assuming that budget of $200 million, which means you have to make between around $600 to $800 million to break even. And again, could be even more than that because we don't know what the actual budget is, and they tend to overspend, especially versus what they tell us they've spent on a movie. But as of right now, no indications as far as total spend. Likely, though, cost about that much. So what do I think is going to happen? I think that, again, this is being over projected here by Box Office Theory, especially these totals. This is him saying he thinks by the end of the run, that Fantastic Four will make between 277 and 395 million. So basically, he's taking, here's your online ticket sales. This was the same fool's gold situation for Superman, right? Superman had these great pre-sales. Fantastic Four, right? Remember the whole story of, oh, the sites are crashing. Fandango's never seen early buyings like this. It was Fantastic Four and Superman that both had something like that happen for Fandango. Maybe Fandango's just not a very good site. Maybe they just have a lot of back-end issues. So because of that, you are seeing some of those early indications being instilled in here and kind of twisting, kind of messing up his formula. Because he does have a formula and it's usually pretty good. I think that these are kind of these rare exceptions, though, where they are over-indexing or they're overstating what the actual box office is going to be. So because of that, if something similar happens with Fantastic Four, as it did with Superman, right? Superman was between 130 and $170 million was the range and only made 125. If 125 to 155 is the range for this movie, we could expect this one to maybe do 100 to 115 in its domestic opening. We'll have to wait and see, of course. But yeah, Fantastic Four right now, not looking all that great. Let's go ahead and pull up Box Office Pro. They tend to be the earliest when it comes to listing their projections for the weekend. So they have a long range forecast of the... So they don't have their box office yet. So Fantastic Four, they're looking at it at 100 to 125 million. That sounds about right. That sounds about right to me. So I'm much more on the side of Box Office Pro right now than I would be on Box Office Theory. And that's not usually the case. In this case, though, it does seem to make the most sense to me. All right, let's get back to y'all's comments, and then we'll wrap things up. I just realized I didn't have that up on the screen. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. My bad. My bad. I'm so sorry. Anyway, there's Box Office Pro, 125 million is what they've had for Fantastic Four. And then Box Office Theory, let me go ahead and get that back up. So that way, at least I have it visually on here for people to see, right? They have it 125 to 155, 277 and 395 total domestic range. And again, I do think that he's over-indexing here. And that's why we could probably expect it to be closer to your Box Office Pro numbers of 100 to 125, at least at this point in time. In general, the battle of the summer, right? We talked earlier before summer started, what's going to be the biggest movie of the summer? And a lot of people were putting Jurassic World at the top, Superman second, and then Fantastic Four third. I think that's most likely going to be what happens. I think Godzilla's going to be able to make, not Godzilla, Jurassic World, they're all the same in my head. Jurassic World Rebirth is going to be able to probably get to the $800+ million range. Superman's going to get to the $600 to $700 million range, and then I honestly think Fantastic Four could be 500 to 600, and maybe even less. Right? We've seen those movies especially struggle this year. Captain America: Brave New World didn't make much of anything. I mean, what, $400-ish million? Thunderbolts had good. Remember, Thunderbolts had very well received audience reactions, didn't leg out. That's why. Just because you have a good Sunday to Monday drop off, just because you have a good report from from the Comcast scores or from the tracking, right? Sorry, I'm blanking out on the names of these things, but your Cinema Score and other things like that. Just because those are good does not mean that the legs are going to be there. It doesn't mean that the people are going to be there to show up. Jose Taco, welcome back to the chat. Fun with Collecting, who is now a member, saying, Fantastic Four has too much stink on it, mainly Pedro pulling a Ziegler and Gunn. Then we have one of the most iconic comic characters, Silver Surfer, missing in action. Yeah. Now, remember, a lot of people, a lot of normies don't know about or not aware of the whole Pedro thing. Pedro is people don't want to hear this, but Pedro is a very popular actor. I can ask my wife right now because she saw a story that she shared with me on Instagram, and it had to do with, maybe we should have this story adapted but have Pedro Pascal in it. He is well liked by a lot of people, especially those normie audiences. So that's not going to be as much of a factor as you think. It's going to impact us. It's going to impact people who follow this stuff, hardcore fans. It absolutely could impact us. I think the Silver Surfer thing will be a much bigger problem for the movie, for comic fans and others like that, than will his behavior and his actions. Now, again, a lot more people will know about his actions. It's like James Gunn, right? James Gunn, more than any other director, has a lot more heat, or more people are aware of his heat, more aware of his issues, just like more people are aware of the problems with Pedro Pascal as well. So it'll have some impact. But I think that if anything's going to hurt it, it's going to be female Silver Surfer and those other things. Let's see, Jose Taco tagged to say, how hard is it to get a budget sheet to get where all the money went from salary of the catering? Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good question. Right? We get the breakdown from theaters every year, but for some reason, I don't know where to. I think you have to be, signed up with maybe something. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly where that falls in and where to find that information. But that's why I go back to it saying, because we do have a public filing, because we do have the actual, budget that was reported being $360 million. I'm sorry. I don't buy the whole, that was just a number they put on there to get the most money back or something like that. It's like, I'm sorry, you're lying on a tax form. The more act had to say, can't wait until we get past Fantastic Four so we can talk about Nobody 2. Me too, man. That's like the next film I'm actually looking forward to. Chimera, what's going on, Chimera? Thank you very much for being here. And thank you for the $2 super chat. The Australian $2 super chat here saying, Fantastic Four is 100% beating Super Midman. Ooh, Chimera. It's a very bold claim. I don't see it. I don't see that happening. Because remember, the same tracking that earlier said Superman was going to do 130 to 170, only made 125, is now saying, right, same amount of time has passed. There has not been a lot of major changes in that tracking that Box Office Theory does. He has the Fantastic Four film going 125 to 150. So if the same thing happens to that movie that happened with Superman, I think that's a very high likely possibility because they are both benefiting from these very overinflated early ticket sales, and that goes into his equations. do not be surprised if it comes in much less than that, which guess what? If you're less than 125, which is your bottom range, that means you're making less than Superman. So yeah, Fantastic Four, I don't think that's going to beat Superman. I think Superman's going to be your number 2 film, but of the 3 that we've just mentioned. Is in heat. I'm not saying that, Vivander. I am not saying that. Fantastic Four looks to have a story that isn't from the skibbity toilet mindset. I don't know, man. I think you're giving it a little bit too much credit, man. A little bit too much credit. Yeah, I think that people are definitely more critical of Superman because some people have kind of, as a defense, said, oh, well, it's not made for me. It's made for a Gen Z audience. I'm like, really? What makes you say that? Because a couple of phrases are mentioned. It's like when people are like, oh, yeah, the Riri Williams Ironheart show. It's made for Gen Z. It's made for the upcoming. It's like, oh, what was your evidence? The fact that in their conversations they used, I don't think that they actually used the expression Riz, but basically like of that mindset. It's like, oh, just because you say a word in a conversation, that just automatically makes it for that specific audience. No, these are shows and movies that are being made for the people themselves, right? It's being, James Gunn's Superman was made for James Gunn. The story and all the elements in there clearly point to that. Because it's like, okay, you just wrote yourself into this movie with so many different things. But anyway, I'm overtime today. It is now past time to go over to support the lovely fellows over on Geeks and Gamers Daily. I'm sure they'll be covering Superman box office, probably that Sunday to Monday drop-off being pretty good, right? A pretty good hold there. And also, we'll be likely talking about the upcoming Fantastic Four, amongst other stories in the media as well. So make sure to check them out if you have not done so already. Many of you are probably already subscribers over at geeksandgamers.com. I write for geeksandgamers.com. Every Sunday I do a box office article. So if you think my videos are too rambling or too long, hey, a much shorter article is also posted every week over there. So go check that out on geeksandgamers.com. And let's just get our last comments in. Fun with collecting saying, bingo. Fear FEMA saying, have a great day. James Gunn equals Kathleen Kennedy. Self-insert level. Rogue Attraction. Definitely getting to that point. And then fun with collecting. Enjoy your day, sir. Appreciate that, everybody. So you guys are all amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. See you all hopefully on Friday for FNT, where we'll be talking about Eddington for some reason. I don't know why Gary is giving that for us for homework when it's not going to make any box office, and it's an A24 release of a weird director who did films like, Midsommar, I think. And I think it's Midsummer, but still. Midsommar, as it was spelled. Anyway, fun for me. And I'm going to go rest my back. You guys are all amazing. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Wednesday. I didn't do this earlier either. It is a Feria Day, but it is the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, or commemoration of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So, blessed feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people, have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.